Sunrise, my fellow chimera. I'm Alexander Christian, and today I'm going to talk about fantasy. I actually wrote a script for this, so I'm going to be trying to read and stuff. It's going to be complicated. Probably be terrible. You just stick around to the end. So, first and foremost, here's a disclaimer. I am not a degree-holding professional. I am not a New York Times best-selling author. I'm just a guy with opinions. So, if you disagree with what I say, cool. Okay, fantasy. What is fantasy? To most people, fantasy is a genre of fiction that is commonly defined by dragons and magic and medieval themes, right? But I don't see it that way at all. To me, fantasy is a story surrounded by and filled with the fantastic. And what exactly is that? So, we're going to take a look at this. Looking at the etymology of the word fantasy. Fantasy comes from the Greek word that, meaning making visible. It is a genre of fiction that concentrates on imagery. So here's the thing about that. That phrase, making visible, is a way of saying taking something that only exists in your head and sharing it with the rest of the world. I really don't see the point of fantasy that is not fantastic. So I'm personally not a fan of low fantasy, and if you are, that's fantastic, cool. Write it out, sell books, hit your target audience. I'm just not me. That's just not me. But I think low fantasy is misnamed because it's typically, or is usually not, in my experience, low fantasy, but low magic. Or it's not low magic, but it's low fantasy. It's early. So, if you have a story that's set in a fictional world on a fictional continent, and it's got fictional characters, but there is no difference. It works pretty much just like medieval England worked. I don't see the point. If that's what you want to do, if there's a story inside you that you need to tell, knock your thing out. But I don't get it. Fantasy literature has a slightly different definition. Fantasy literature is literature set in an imaginary universe, often but not always without any locations, events, or people from the real world. Magic, the supernatural, and magical creatures are common in many of these imaginary worlds. Got you? Cool. Nice, succinct summary. Low fantasy, on the other hand, or intrusion fantasy, is a subgenre of fantasy fiction in which magical events intrude on an otherwise normal world. The term thus contrasts with high fantasy stories, which take place in fictional worlds that have their own set of rules and physical laws. If you are in a world, there we go, that has the same rules of physics that we have, whatever story you tell, it's going to be roughly the same. It's only, the whole thing about magic is breaking the rules of physics. It's doing that which we understand is impossible. So I got a question for you. If you have a world and it's as technologically advanced as Star Trek, you got some equivalent of flying cars, you got carriages that pull themselves without horses, elevators, running water, yada yada yada. But it's all powered by the ambient magic exuded by a sleeping dragon, right? I don't know if that's low fantasy. Is that low fantasy? I don't know. But I do know it is fantastic. I do know it allows you to do things you quite simply could not do based on physics as we understand it. And that's what I'm here for. Why write in the fantasy genre if you're not writing for fantasy? I've asked this question before and someone said because I want to. And I guess that makes sense. But I just don't, I wouldn't write a horror book without horror in it just because I love the horror fantasy. And, that's just me. You do what you do. So my point is this. I read fantasy for the fantastic. I don't want to read about normal people living normal lives in a strange world that doesn't even seem strange to them. right? So everything about this thing is like it's a love story, but it's in a fictional kingdom, in a fictional land where everything is the same but the names. I just don't get the point. Superman on a world full of Supermen is not a story that interests me. No, not not when I was trying to think of a way that maybe it could be. No, not at all. So when I'm picking up your book, when I'm looking at your cover, when I'm reading your blurb, I'm under the impression you're going to show me something that exists that could only exist because of your unique perspective and imagination. And if I'm not getting that, what are you giving me? So anyway, that brings me to the end of this video, and I got to start doing this thing because I haven't been doing this thing, and I need to do this thing. So remember to like, subscribe, tell your friends about it. Go over to their house, log in, like my stuff on their computer without their knowledge. That's all fine. It's ethical. It's cool. Tell your friends about me. All of this is to support my dream of becoming rich and famous so I can infect the world with more of these fantastic ideas. Yeah, fantastic. See what I did there? Anyway, keep writing and continue to ascend. Peace.